Morning, everyone. On behalf of the ISO, I'd like to welcome you to today's Q1 Market Performance and Planning Forum. My name is Christina Guimera, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I will be facilitating today's meeting. This quarterly forum engages stakeholders in review of market performance issues and high-level dialogue on release planning, implementation, and new market enhancements. This call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. Any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. Please keep comments respectful and remember to be brief and refrain from too much repetition so that we can keep the meeting flowing efficiently. To ask questions during the meeting, you can open the participant and chat panels on the bottom right. You can then raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon, or if you joined audio only, please press *3 on your device. And for everyone joining us today, please state your name and affiliation first before speaking. And when you're sending in comments and questions, you can send it in via chat to all panelists or to me. Today's objective is to enable dialogue on implementation planning and market performance issues. We will be reviewing key market performance topics and sharing updates to 2024 and 2025 release plans resulting from stakeholder input. Today's agenda will include a policy update by Becky Robinson, followed by a market performance update and policy update by the Market Performance and Advanced Analytics team, and also the short-term forecasting team. Afterwards, we'll hear from Trang Vo regarding a release update, and then I'll wrap this up with some next steps before we close out today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Becky to get us started.
All right, good morning. Thank you, Christina. I'm Becky Robinson, Director of Market Policy Development, and I will be providing the policy update this morning. If we could go to the next slide, please. So first up, on EDAM congestion revenue allocation, we are starting a new stakeholder initiative on this topic to explore this issue. This is prompted by some questions that have been raised in FERC docket related to the PacifiCorp Open Access Transmission Tariff filing related to their EDAM participation. So we plan to kick this off next Monday, I believe, and you'll be hearing more about sort of the scope that we have in mind. We're hoping to have this be a rather targeted initiative to explore some issues, but also kind of, explore them quickly. And by the time potentially of the May Board of Governors and Governing Body meetings. And to facilitate that schedule and that pace, we will be adjusting some schedules on some other policy initiatives to make space for stakeholders to devote their attention to this matter. And I will pause at the end of each slide in case there's any questions on the slide. So happy to take any questions on this if there are any. One other note on this item, while we're waiting to see if there's any questions, is to note that if you haven't seen it, we published an issue paper on this topic on Monday this week. So I believe that was the 17th. And so that's out there on the CAISO website. If you haven't seen it, please do go take a look at that.
And I'm not seeing any questions coming in quite yet, Becky.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so next initiative is on assistance energy transfer and Western Energy Imbalance Market resource efficiency evaluation. So we are planning an upcoming kickoff for the assistance energy transfer extension discussion. The tariff provisions around assistance energy transfer currently sunset at the end of this year. And so our preliminary sense is that we should be extending this product in some way. And our analysis team has done some analysis to look at how the product has been used and how that, and so we'll be starting by looking at that analysis to help inform whether the product is working well as it's designed now, whether we should explore any modifications. And you may, if you've been sort of listening to some of the governing body meetings where we've given policy updates there, I think there is sort of a leaning among folks, governing body members, and what they've been hearing from the from stakeholders that, maybe at this time we just extend the product, but we want to, have a public process, get stakeholder feedback on that, and happy to move forward with that if that is the desire, and happy to hear feedback, in any direction. But we want to sort of address that matter first, given the due date that we have of the end of the year and getting board approval and FERC approval and so forth of the tariff. And if there's any desire from stakeholders for additional scope related to resource efficiency enhancement, we can consider that in a subsequent initiative, which would start later this year, potentially. And any questions there?
Not seeing any hands raised at this time.
All right, we can go to the next slide then. Price formation enhancements. So we continue to make progress in phase 2 of this initiative, advancing the development of proposals for our 3 big topics here: scarcity pricing, BAA level market power mitigation, and fast start pricing. And this initiative has been covering a lot of ground, and it's been having weekly stakeholder meetings, which has been great because we have covered a lot of ground and heard a lot from stakeholders. But in light of the EDAM congestion revenue allocation initiative that I mentioned earlier, we plan to adjust the schedule of stakeholder meetings on this initiative to kind of recognize the need for stakeholder bandwidth discussed earlier. And I think we can take this as an opportunity internally to kind of take a step back, reflect on, gather thoughts as to what all we've covered and what we've heard from stakeholders, so that we kind of continue the work, but with less time on the stakeholder calendar for now. And I should say as well, this isn't the only initiative where we'll be adjusting schedules, but just since it's had weekly stakeholder meetings, it's one that we feel the need to sort of make some adjustments. So in the near term, you'll see the next couple of meetings on this probably be canceled, and while we take that time and give stakeholders that time back for now, but more to come here. Any questions?
Not seeing any questions at this time.
All right, thank you, Christina. Next slide, please. Greenhouse gas coordination. So this working group is continuing to work through and put together that accounting and reporting approach for state policies that have a requirement to reduce carbon emissions, but do so without a price on carbon emissions. And so on this issue, we put out an issue paper late last year, and the working group is continuing to move forward to design the specifics of what does that report look like? What is it taking into consideration? How does the math of that look? And we may, this may be something that we need to take to the Board of Governors and governing body to kind of put something in the tariff that would provide for how the funding of that report creation would work. On other fronts in that same initiative, we've been talking a lot about GHG metrics and information to help support compliance with various state, local, and corporate GHG reduction programs or goals. And so, as you may know, the ISO is now reporting average GHG emissions rates, both monthly and annually. And we'll have additional metrics reports that become available as we move into the accounting and reporting excuse me, as we start doing those reports on the accounting and reporting approach. And the working group has also been finalizing some GHG metrics that would be monitored as we launch EDAM. And finally, the working group has continued to review elements of the GHG design in both the Western Energy Imbalance Market structure and as planned for in the extended day-ahead market. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions on GHG.
Not seeing any questions coming in.
All right, next slide then. Gas resource management. So on this initiative, you may recall we put out a comprehensive issue paper early this year in January. We've had a stakeholder meeting to discuss. We've gotten comments in from stakeholders, and we're now sort of working through what might a straw proposal look like based on those comments. And in those comments, we see a desire to focus on enhancing advisory gas burn information in advance of the day-ahead market, so that folks have more of an idea even before they see the day-ahead market results of how their units might run. Also an interest in exploring cost recovery in exceptional circumstances, and also interest in ISO coordination with gas pipelines during restrictive operating conditions. So some of these potential changes would be process enhancements, whereas others may require tariff changes and be something that we take to the board and governing body. Any questions on gas resource management?
Not seeing any questions coming in.
All right, thank you. Next slide. Congestion revenue rights. So this working group is off to a good start. I think the date on here for the next meeting is actually outdated. So I don't think we're having a meeting on March 25th. We may have moved that because there is a governing body meeting that day, I believe. But there will be an upcoming meeting in the next several weeks planned. So that date should be getting corrected on the stakeholder calendar if it isn't already. So thus far, the working group has discussed sort of the scope of the initiative, different ideas about that. It's discussed the current CRR program structure and function, and it's taken a good amount of time to discuss some in-depth analysis that our team has put together on how the CRR market is working and what we see the results there. And if you haven't seen that yet and are interested in it, there's a lot there. So I would recommend that you find that on our website on the CRR initiative webpage. So and really this initiative, just to kind of ground, is part of it's sort of, when we did the 2018 reforms, which were designed to resolve some inefficiencies that we saw in the CRR auction. At that time, the ISO committed to assess the impacts of the proposals and the changes we put in place then, and to consider more comprehensive changes to the CRR allocation and auction design if needed. So this initiative kind of fits squarely within that commitment that we made several years ago, and now we've got a significant amount of data seeing how that has been playing out. Any questions on CRRs?
Not seeing any questions coming in, but I did check the next meeting date is April 1st, but we'll be sending out a notice soon for that.
Thank you, Christina. All right, next slide, please. Demand and distributed energy market integration. So this is a new working group that has met a few times, exploring developing or enhancing participation models and market rules associated with demand response and distributed energy resource participation. It's casting sort of a broad net, really all things demand side flexibility. It had a kickoff working group call in February and a March working group session to start stakeholder-led scoping on this, and we'll be working on a discussion paper to publish to kind of organize some stakeholder feedback and sort of tee things up in terms of wanting to prioritize among the various pieces of this that have been brought up and teed up for potential discussion. And so a lot more to come in that space. And I think we have a comment deadline coming up in the next couple of weeks on that effort as well. Any questions on demand and distributed energy market integration?
I'm not seeing any questions coming in at this time.
All right, next slide, please. Storage design and modeling. So we've been having stakeholder working group meetings on these topics. We've been covering a lot of ground here. And on the April 2nd date that's there, we may be shifting that meeting out. This may be one where we can help make a little bit of room on the stakeholder calendar. So I think it still shows up there on the stakeholder calendar for now, but just to be aware that that may be one that gets canceled, and we have a meeting, I know, a couple weeks later on April 14th. So just sharing that for now. But in the storage design and modeling initiative, the meetings have been discussing a number of topics and kind of level setting on some things, such as storage constraints that are existing or planned, for instance, with the introduction of day-ahead market enhancements, and use of implied bid spreads. And so that's been, there's been a lot of information and education and good conversation coming out of those meetings on those topics. We've also had stakeholders present on issues that they see as important and kind of raising those for the broader stakeholder community. Those presentations have covered topics like hybrid resources and issues particular to those. And again, hybrid resources are where you have a storage resource as well as another kind of generating resource, such as solar or wind, paired together as a single configuration and following a single dispatch signal as opposed to two separate dispatch signals. So hybrid resources has been one area. Just novel participation pathways in terms of thinking about bidding energy storage resources and products associated with storage resource participation, as well as outage management topics in terms of how are storage resources submitting outage cards and how that corresponds to what actually is happening at the energy storage facilities. So we are working on an issue paper and a straw proposal to put out for stakeholders later this month, I believe, and that would cover some of these topics related to outage management system enhancements, so that there's more clarity on how, what we expect and sort of a general shared understanding of what we expect to see on outage cards and for various reasons. Also, it would cover state of charge definition and some enhancements there that we've been talking about, so that again, there's a general shared understanding of what we mean when we say state of charge. And issues related to non-linearity, which is related to a concept called foldback. If you're following those discussions where sort of at the top and bottom of the range of state of charge, ramp rates may be slower than typical if you're more in the middle of the range of output of the resource. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions.
Not seeing any questions coming in at the moment.
Not seeing any. I think we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So resource adequacy. These working groups have been working towards straw proposals, and we've got 3 tracks of issues that this initiative is covering. The first is on modeling and default standards. And so this starts with loss of load expectation modeling, so that the very foundation of all of our resource adequacy work is based on planning to meet a 1 day in 10 years loss of load expectation as sort of the standard. That in that track, we're also exploring updating our default planning reserve margin and default counting rules that we have in the tariff, which are available for local regulatory authorities to take into account in their decisions about planning. Also talking about exploring an unforced capacity, or UCAP, capacity accreditation framework in collaboration with the California Public Utilities Commission in particular, as well as with other local regulatory authorities, and accounting for ambient D-rates due to temperature for resource adequacy resources, particularly in the summer timeframe. In track 2, we're covering a couple of sets of issues there: outage and substitution policies and practices, as well as availability and performance incentives, and really looking to kind of improve both of those where we see some shortcomings in our current models, and where we can make those improvements there. And then track 3 on visibility and backstop reform. We have been talking with stakeholders about how to increase the ISO's visibility into potential available backstop capacity, and we've made some good progress there. also increasing transparency to stakeholders on that backstop decision making when we get into potential, those potential situations, and updating the current backstop product. And then something that we, an issue maybe for the longer term is thinking about solutions for the ISO BA around curing deficiencies related to the EDAM resource efficiency evaluation and assigning costs related to curing those deficiencies. But that's something that we, I think that's more of a longer term topic that we've not, for instance, I don't think we'll be in the next set of straw proposals that we'll be sharing with stakeholders in probably the April May timeframe. All right, I know that's a lot on resource adequacy. Any questions there?
I'm not seeing any questions coming in at this moment.
Not seeing any. I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, on our policy initiatives catalog and roadmap. So we've had stakeholders submit discretionary policy initiative proposals during February, and we've got a stakeholder prioritization workshop teed up for April 2nd and the Regional Issues Forum Roundtable April 9th. So coming up in the next several weeks. And then following the typical process, we will have a stakeholder prioritization and ranking survey in the May 2025 timeframe. But one thing I wanted to flag, excuse me, that we may also be thinking of, that we're also thinking about doing as part of the catalog prioritization process, is related to the topic that we started with of the need to kind of make some room on the stakeholder calendar. And this is really, I think, prompted by two things. One is the new initiative on EDAM congestion revenue allocation, and wanting to make sure that folks have time to focus on that for the next couple of months. But also, we've been hearing even before we decided to kick off that initiative that some stakeholders felt like there was just a lot on the plate in terms of stakeholder initiatives and a lot going on, and maybe too much going on. So with that in mind, we've thought a lot about what, what we see as sort of more important near term and so forth. But we'd also like to hear from stakeholders on that and incorporate stakeholder feedback into any decisions we make about sort of how to adjust schedules. And so that may be something where we tee up as part of the catalog process, and potentially even at that April 2nd stakeholder meeting, to get stakeholders thinking about, is there a need to adjust schedules, and sort of what are the stakeholder priorities in terms of things that should keep moving at their current pace versus things that in your minds that we could slow down and that would be fine, etc. So keep an eye out for that, and we'll be looking for feedback on that topic. Any questions there?
Not seeing any questions at this moment.
And I think we can go to the next slide, which is just our policy initiative process diagram. And then the next slide. Here we've got our graphic showing sort of what stage each of the market policy initiatives are at. And I think that is my last slide. So I'll pause again if there's any final questions.
I'm not seeing any questions at this moment. So I will turn it over next to Hai Feng to go over a market performance update.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Becky.
Pass it back to you, Christina.
Thank you. And just a reminder to everyone, for any of those meetings that were mentioned during Becky's presentation, you can register for those in-person meetings
Christina,
on our calendar.
You may be on mute. We're not hearing your audio come through.
Stacy, are you able to hear me fine?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, it looks like others can hear me. Okay, so I will continue. So yeah, if for any meetings you can always register on our calendar. So I will now turn it over to Haifeng for the market performance update.
Thank you, Christina. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Haifeng Lu. I'm manager of the market validation team in the Department of Market Performance and Advanced Analytics. Next slide, please. Today, we'll go over the following items. The first one is pricing of multiple contingencies. We'll also talk about shipping factor enhancement, assist energy transfer, ancillary services procurement, gas and power prices and the market costs, energy storage resources, load conformance, and lastly, general market performance matrix. Next slide, please. First, I'll talk about pricing of congestion from multiple contingencies. Next slide. Each of the California ISO markets consists of two market optimizations to achieve binding schedules and prices. The first run is scheduling run. The second run is pricing run. The scheduling run performs uneconomical adjustments of schedules and relaxations of constraints based on predefined priorities with corresponding penalty prices. Penalty price is also called scheduling parameter. The scheduling run is the starting point for the pricing run. The pricing run uses prices based on the bid cap and the floor to clear at economically meaningful prices for settlement. Next slide. In the ISO markets, transmission constraints can be relaxed in the scheduling run. Penalty prices are used to determine when the market optimization will relax enforced transmission constraint rather than adjusting supply or demand bids or non-priced quantities to relieve congestion on the transmission constraint in the scheduling run. In the integrated forward market, as part of the day-ahead market, the penalty price of relaxing the enforced transmission constraint is $5,000 per megawatt hour, based on the $1,000 per megawatt hour bid cap. On the other hand, in the real-time market, the penalty price is $1,500 per megawatt hour for transmission constraint relaxation, based on the $1,000 per megawatt hour bid cap. When the cost of redispatching resources to relieve congestion per megawatt hour on a transmission constraint exceeds the applicable penalty price, the market software will relax the transmission constraint. Next slide, please. The ISO markets enforce thermal limit constraints, such as flow gate constraints and base case scenarios. The markets also enforce security-based constraints, such as nomograms and contingencies. The market enforces transmission constraints that protect the power system in case of a contingency of an outage of another transmission element. All enforced contingencies are equally considered without regard to relief or relative impact. And one transmission constraint can typically be associated with multiple contingencies. And all these contingencies are enforced in the market. When a transmission constraint is relaxed under multiple contingencies in the scheduling run, high compounded prices in the pricing run can result due to the application of the penalty price for multiple contingencies. Next slide, please. So here is an example to help us understand. In this example, a transmission constraint is relaxed under 9 contingencies in the scheduling run in a 15-minute market. The shadow price of each relaxed transmission constraint and the contingency pair is $1,500 per megawatt hour in the scheduling run. Therefore, the total price of the relaxed transmission constraint is 9 times the penalty price of $1,500 per megawatt hour, which is equal to $13,500 per megawatt hour in the scheduling run, just for one transmission constraint. And then after the scheduling run, in the pricing run, the shadow price of the transmission constraint is $9,000 per megawatt hour in the pricing run. And I will explain why it's $9,000. So in this example, there's a marginal resource. It has $320 per megawatt hour bid. And by the definition of marginal resource, the marginal resource locational marginal price is equal to its bid. Therefore, the LMP of the marginal resource is also $320 per megawatt hour. And in this example, the system marginal energy cost is $50 per megawatt hour, and the marginal cost of losses is 0. Therefore, we can calculate the marginal cost of a congestion as LMP, locational marginal price, minus system marginal energy cost minus marginal cost of losses. So we get $270 marginal cost of a congestion. And we know the marginal cost of a congestion is shadow price of the binding transmission constraint times shift factor. Therefore, we can calculate the shadow price as the marginal cost of a congestion divided by shift factor. So we divided $270 marginal cost of congestion by 3% shift factor. As shown in this plot, we get $9,000 per megawatt hour shadow price of the binding constraint in the pricing run. Let me pause it here. Any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions coming in at the moment.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So in this example, if a pricing node, a P node, close to the transmission constraint has negative 30% shift factor, its LMP is equal to $2,750 per megawatt hour, based on the shadow price of the binding transmission constraint, marginal cost of energy, and the marginal cost of losses. We can calculate the pricing node LMP as $2,750 per megawatt hour. That's pretty high, considering the bid cap is $1,000 per megawatt hour. So in this example, the extreme shadow price of the binding transmission constraint, high LMP, and inefficient resource award for congestion management are due to the application of the penalty price of $1,500 per megawatt hour on the same transmission constraint 9 times in the scheduling run. So that's what we have today. Next slide, please. The ISO is exploring an enhancement to the pricing process for multiple contingencies. So if we use the same example here, the same transmission constraint is relaxed under 9 contingencies in the scheduling run. Instead of pricing the 9 relaxed contingencies 9 times, the enhancement is to just price the most relaxed transmission constraint and the contingency pair in the scheduling run. And the shadow price of the remaining 8 pairs of relaxed transmission constraint and the contingency is 0 in the scheduling run. That's the difference. Under this enhancement, the total shadow price of the relaxed transmission constraint is $1,500 per megawatt hour in the scheduling run. Next slide, please. So for the same example, the shadow price of the transmission constraint is $1,200 per megawatt hour in the pricing run, and I will go through the calculation. So for this example, the marginal resource has $170 per megawatt hour bid. The system marginal energy cost remains the same as $50 per megawatt hour. Marginal cost of losses is 0, same as in the previous example. Therefore, we can calculate the marginal cost of congestion as LMP minus system marginal energy cost minus marginal cost of losses. So we get $120 per megawatt hour marginal cost of congestion. And then we can do the same calculation for the shadow price of the binding transmission constraint as the marginal cost of congestion divided by shift factor. The marginal resource in this example has negative 10% shift factor. So we divide $120 per megawatt hour marginal cost of congestion by 10% shift factor. We get $1,200 per megawatt hour shadow price of the binding constraint. And for the same pricing node close to the transmission constraint with negative 30% shift factor, now it only has $410 per megawatt hour LMP. So the enhancement addresses the extreme shadow price, high LMP, and the inefficient resource award for congestion mitigation by pricing the most relaxed contingency in the scheduling run. Next slide, please. GISO plans to enhance the pricing mechanism to price the most relaxed contingency in the scheduling run when a transmission constraint is relaxed under multiple contingencies in the scheduling run. And the market optimization will only price the most relaxed contingency among all relaxed contingencies in the scheduling run. This will address the compounded pricing due to transmission constraint relaxation under multiple contingencies. At the same time, all credible contingencies determined by operation engineers will continue to be enforced in the market. GISO will proceed with a change for the business practice manual for market operations. That's all of my presentation. Any questions, comments?
Yes, we do have a hand raised by Carrie Bentley.
Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Carrie Bentley with the Western Power Trading Forum. I just have a couple of questions so I can make sure I understand this. The first one is just more general, and if you could answer that, and then I'll have a couple more specific, more technical ones. Are you seeing this occur in the market, either in the WEEM or in the CAISO area itself? And so that's what's driving this need for the change?
Yes, mostly this happens in California ISO BAA. It did not happen often in WEIM BAAs.
Okay, and is it occurring frequently, or is it pretty infrequent? Do you know?
It happens, usually it happens during summer months with higher system demand. It does not happen often during winter timeframe.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, and then I'm going to try and wrap my mind around this. So if you have lots of different enforced contingencies, and they are being equally considered. I kind of see why that's duplicative, but at the same time, just using the most relaxed, I wonder if that will still fully capture the system conditions. Because I think the reason why we set it up this way in the first place was because the more kind of redispatch you needed, and the total price of all the relaxed transmission constraints was supposed to indicate to the market, you know, it's not just one transmission constraint that you're relaxing, right? There's issues across the grid. So I guess I'm wondering if you're just using the price from the most relaxed one and you have these additional transmission constraints that you're relaxing, the price will look the same, right? Whether you have one transmission constraint you're relaxing or multiple. Am I understanding that right?
Yes. So basically, most relaxed transmission constraint is, the most limiting constraints, the most limiting contingency, and it should cover the other less severe contingency. So in operation studies, right, usually operation engineers study different system condition contingencies, and they determine the most limiting contingency. So that's the ideal world, right? So then the market can use that most limiting contingency, enforce that contingency, and run optimization, find a mitigation for that. So this is kind of to mimic what operation engineers do, and this is very specific to the transmission constraint contingency relaxation, and that does not happen often in the market because with expanded market footprint, and usually there's enough resources to mitigate congestion, which will not cause relaxation of a transmission constraint. When the relaxation occurs, basically it means the market has already exhausted economic dispatch.
Yeah. Okay, so a thought experiment so I can understand this from the resource side. Imagine, so on your page 25, your example, imagine that resource was suddenly 1 mega, like increased its Pmax by 1 megawatt. So if it could increase its output by 1 megawatt and say all the constraints were only violated by 1 megawatt, would that one additional megawatt though lead to all the constraints now not needing to be relaxed, or just the most relaxed one? I just want to make sure I understand. So are you saying that additional, like you could resolve all the constraints by inking up that resource by 1 megawatt? Does that question make sense? Like, I just want to see, like, are you fully capturing the pricing impacts from the resource LMP perspective?
Sure. Can we go back to page 29? Christina, please. 25, right?
25, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, so can you say what you said? You said it from the planning perspective, but I think about the market from the P-node perspective. So I guess I'm just trying to understand whether if you make this change, whether that makes sense from a pricing perspective.
Yes. So basically, that depends on the shift factor. Usually, based on our observation, they are very close for multiple contingencies. So it may not be 1-to-1, but if we increase the resource Pmax by 1 megawatt, we'll see impact on the other contingencies as well.
Well, so I know you would see an impact, but so this to me says if you're only pricing in the most relaxed, that 1 megawatt, basically this seems like I don't know how to explain it. It seems like you're artificially suppressing prices because that 1 megawatt would relieve the most constrained impact, but then you're not pricing in the fact that you would need additional megawatts for all the other transmission constraints that are still binding.
No, I mean, the same megawatt will mitigate, relieve congestion on the other contingencies as well.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was asking. So
Mhm.
it truly is that this was designed wrong in the first place, and we've been overestimating the impact, like double counting, not that we're now undercounting.
Now we believe this is a reasonable way. So if we look at this example, right, it's in the pricing round that's used for settlement. As of now, in this extreme example, I would say this is extreme example.
Yeah.
In this extreme example, the shadow price in the pricing round of the binding transmission constraint is $9,000 per megawatt hour. That's very, very high, considering $1,000 data cap.
I mean, so I disagree that it's very high. I mean, that's what we set up the market as, to send appropriate signals. And I don't think our goal should be to reduce prices. I think our goal should be to create accurate prices. And so my concern is, like, let's not take an extreme example. Let's imagine it was only, $90 or $900. It seems like then you're just ignoring the shadow prices of all the other transmission constraints, right? If you're just taking one, what happens to all those other shadow prices? They're just not in the equations anymore.
No, that's not the case.
Okay.
$90, $60, $900, even as I show in the enhancement, it still produced $1,200 shadow price, right? So for all those $90, $100 range, economic range, there's no change. Okay, for those ones, we still enforce all the contingencies and do economic dispatch, security constrained economic dispatch. There's no change in that. The enhancement is very specific to this, compounded shadow price because of contingency relaxation for multiple cases. For another example, right, if a transmission constraint is already overloaded in the base case, okay, and in the market, if we have like 100 contingencies, Northern California, Southern California, and the transmission constraint is in Northern California, it's already overloaded in the binding in the normal condition, and the emergency limit is equal to the normal limit. In that case, we don't want to see the transmission constraint relaxed for 100 contingencies. For all those non-relevant contingencies, they are just non-relevant. For transmission constraint in Northern California, right? Then for the remaining 50 contingencies in Southern California, that just does not make sense because it's already overloaded in the base case. We do not want to see the compounded prices because we apply the penalty price for 100 times, right? That does not make sense.
Yeah. Okay, that example was very helpful to me. I think what you're saying is, I mean, in that case, if the North's cut off from the South, and you then have 100 other small contingencies that also mean the North is cut off from the South, that it does seem odd why
exactly
add those up. So that makes sense. So basically, you're saying for each kind of constraint, you're going to use is it the high? It's not the highest shadow price. It's the most relaxed transmission constraint. Does that necessarily also mean that will be the highest shadow price?
It means the most limiting constraint or the most limiting system condition.
From not a price perspective.
Usually it corresponds to the most severe congestion. usually.
Usually, but not, yeah, but not
Mhm.
not technically always. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you for indulging me in all these questions. I think I understand now.
You're welcome. Thank you for the questions. Any other questions?
Yes, we have a few more. Next in the queue, we have Michael Kramick.
Hi, it's
Please
Mike
go
Kramick
ahead,
from
Michael.
Boston Energy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, I guess two questions, I guess. The first is on slide number 27, you say ISO is exploring an enhancement, but on slide 29, you say you plan to enhance. So has KISO, so those kind of, there was wording, that wording is kind of contradictory. So has KISO already made the decision to make the change and you're just telling us now?
Yes. Sorry for the confusion. That's the main purpose we would like to discuss this topic in this forum. To let you know our plan and get feedback from market participants. And if it goes well, and that's our plan to enhance this logic.
And you're saying on slide 29, you say that this only requires a BPM change. This doesn't require a tariff change. I'm kind of surprised given that how it's going to impact pricing. I would think that would be somewhere in the tariff, but I'm just curious if that's all you feel you need to do is just make BPM changes.
Yes, that's correct. We checked with our legal department, and we believe this change is consistent with current tariff.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Michael.
Next in the queue, we have J.K. Wang.
Hey, good morning, Hython. This is J.K. Wang from PGE. Thank you for the very thorough explanation, and I really appreciate examples come along with it. I have follow-up questions from Kelly and the other stakeholder. First of all, can you please clarify when you say the most relaxed contingency? What does the relaxed mean here? Is that like the worst case contingency, or I guess I'm a little confused by like relaxed. Does that mean that this is like less restricted, or that's the most like worst case?
Sure. Yeah, you're right. It's basically the worst overloads, right? The most relaxed contingency. That's in the market optimization, we have transmission constraint. And on the right-hand side of the transmission constraint is the limit of the transmission constraint. And on the left-hand side, we have, resource award, base flow resource award, shift factor, things like that. And normally, it's a feasible transmission constraint in optimization. But as I explained before, right, based on the economics, that constraint can be relaxed, meaning, it's more economical to relax that constraint. Instead of it's an infeasible constraint, we can utilize some slack variable on the left-hand side, such that the constraint is relaxed. Without the slack variable, the constraint is infeasible.
All right, I really appreciate it, because this is like a optimization terminology. When we say relax, it really it's to relieve the congestion. It doesn't mean the contingency itself is relaxed. Okay, that's really helpful. And I think maybe when you and Kelly discussing the questions, I was thinking maybe the setup of the optimization, if you can share some insights, that would be really helpful. So when we say I guess at first I have the impression that the same as Kelly, we have multiple transmission constraints, and you're just pricing it according to one of the constraints. But apparently, it is about the setup of the contingencies. When we run the optimization, there are multiple contingencies, and a few contingencies may overload the same transmission constraint. So it is really about to pick the contingencies, not about to pick the transmission lines. Am I right?
That's right.
Okay, that's really helpful, and I fully agree with the logic. Picking the worst case to price it. It's the right way to do the scheduling as you mentioned. Like it's unlikely multiple contingency will happen at the same time. I have a quick follow-up question on that. So imagine that you're running the full system, and all of these contingencies are running at the same time, and there may be multiple lines, but overloaded by different contingencies. So like it it may be like really straightforward process on your side, but I'm imagining it's actually going to be more complicated. Like how do you identify those lines, like, based on different contingencies? Have the guys already come up with approach, or this is something to further investigate?
Sure. If your question about, for example, right, we have two transmission constraints, transmission line A, transmission line B.
Right.
Then we have 10 contingencies.
Right.
Is your question related to both transmission constraints could be overloaded?
Exactly. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I think our approach is smart enough. Basically, the approach treats each transmission constraint separately. So, for example, the optimization, in optimization, we does not change anything for transmission constraint, transmission line A, right? It could be overloaded by 3 contingencies. Then we include those 3 contingencies as 3 constraints, 3 separate constraints for transmission line A. Okay. Then after that, based on the power flow analysis in the market application, transmission line B could be overloaded by the same 3 contingencies, or maybe by 3 other contingencies, or maybe there's overlapping, right? No matter what, say, for example, transmission line B is overloaded by 3 contingencies. Maybe they're same as the first one. So we include 3 additional constraints in the optimization. And then we use this slack variable concept, right? For each transmission constraint, we have 1 slack variable. And for the second transmission constraint, we have a different slack variable. So that's a trick. The current implementation is, even for the same transmission constraint, we have separate slack variable for each contingency. That's why we see compounded share price in the scheduler, because for each contingency, even they are associated with the same transmission constraint, there's a separate slack variable for that. So in the enhancement, we'll use 1 common slack variable instead of separate slack variable for different contingencies if they are associated with the same transmission constraint. It's like, in other way, it's like, we have a physical transmission line, right? And somebody upgrades the transmission line. So that upgrade will be applicable to all the contingencies. That person does not need to, or entity does not need to upgrade the transmission line 9 times for 9 different contingencies. So in concept, that's similar.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really appreciate your dive down into the technical details. That's really helpful, and I think that helped to alleviate my concern as the previous stakeholder. Why it is just a BPM change? I think that totally makes sense. There was just one very trivial part when you're implementing the algorithm that may occur to a case. It's actually worse than probably more than the most relaxed contingency, because when multiple lines you're choosing that way, appears to the system that line and B loaded both for their worst cases, while the overall worst case is when the 2 lines overloaded. It may not actually happen, but I still think it's better than the current implementation. Okay, I have a final question back to the slide 25. If you have already explained that, I apologize for that. So we mentioned about the enhancement is going to be in the scheduling run. And from your bullet point 3 to 4, um, it- there is actually impact on the pricing run. Can you please elaborate again? How is the scheduling run changes going to impact on the pricing run again?
Sure, that's a very good question. Scheduling run and the pricing run, they're two separate runs, but they are not independent. Basically, the scheduling run sets the stage for the pricing run. Or in other words, the scheduling run is the starting point for the pricing, right? And in this example, really the root cause is the same transmission constraint is overloaded under 9 contingencies in the scheduling. And then if we, it's the same transmission constraint, if we add all the shadow price together, it's $13,500 for the same transmission constraint, the shadow price, total shadow price. So because of that triggers very inefficient resource dispatch. So for this example, the marginal resource has only 3% shift factor, right? And because of that, the marginal resource was triggered in the scheduling run because the market optimization applies the penalty price of $1,500 per megawatt hour 9 times in the scheduling run. That triggers this very inefficient resource dispatch with only 3% shift factor. And so that causes $9,000 shadow price in the pricing because the scheduling run already sets the stage for pricing.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. So it's basically by enhancing the scheduling run, we can have more efficient dispatching by choosing the more economic marginal resource in the pricing run to set a price. Okay, and just quickly follow up on that, are we also going to, I assume there will also be penalty price in the pricing run as well, but probably set to a lower value. Are we going to enhance the logic there too, just in case, I assume there will also be contingency set up in the pricing run as well. Are we going to only looking at the most relaxed contingency to allow them to set a price?
Yes, that's another great question. The penalty price in the scheduling run is $1,500 per megawatt hour in the real-time market, and the penalty price in the pricing run is $1,000 per megawatt hour in the pricing run. It's consistent with the bid cap of $1,000 per megawatt hour in the real-time market. So that's the penalty price difference. To answer your question, the pricing run already has a setup for the worst contingency in the pricing.
Okay. Okay, I think I can buy that. Thank you very much. This is really helpful, and I appreciate all your examples and dive into detail. Thank you for that.
Thank you, JK. Nice to hear you.
Next in the queue, we have a hand raised by Dan Williams.
Hi, this is Dan Williams from the Energy Authority. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please go ahead, Dan.
Great. Yeah, so first, have been great questions and responses and such here, and really appreciate the effort and that went into the work to bring this forward, and also just that the ISO brought this out to the MPPF for a wider audience to get to see it kind of before working through the BPM change process on it. As you were talking through the explanation, I just want to kind of test a takeaway that I had on this, and I sort of see this as like the right solution or a very sensible solution if these situations are happening because of forced outages or something that's really sort of unexpected and unavoidable in the market, wildfires, multiple things just sort of going wrong in the system at the same time. But if this is happening simply because there are a lack of economic bids in the market or a lack of flexible participation by resources and load, then I would be concerned that we, may not be pursuing a solution that could be more overall beneficial for the market, or maybe just that we should be looking at ways to incentivize more flexibility into the market on both the supply and demand side, so that congestion can be managed with resources that can move and loads that can move close to where the transmission contingencies are happening. So one, I was just kind of curious if that resonated with you, and then two, just would be a request to continue tracking this after, and you're probably already going to do this, but just as a stakeholder, would appreciate seeing you continue tracking this after the changes are made, and to kind of track and report back the instances where we do have these sort of multiple binding constraint events occurring, to see whether it is forced outages or whether it's market participant decisions on the load or resource side that are really driving these types of difficulties within the market solution.
Thank you for the comments, Dan. Yeah, for sure, we'll continue to monitor and check the market performance after the implementation. Hopefully, it will be implemented soon. To answer your first question, I agree. Under extreme cases, right? So we may lose multiple lines, but usually, our goal is to find a reasonable solution instead of extreme solution, right? So this does not happen often. It happens usually during summer months with high demand, and for the severe system conditions, usually there's time between, loss of multiple transmission elements. So that being said, right after we lose one transmission element, the market is positioned to solve for the next worst contingency. Okay, so in that case, the enhancement still covers that scenario. It's very unlikely, right, for the system to lose, for example, 9 transmission elements, nine close transmission elements altogether at the same time. The probability is very low, and we believe this approach is consistent with current NERC standard, right, planning standard, reliability standard, to plan for for example, N-1 contingency, N-1 criteria. NERC does not require us to plan the system for example, N-9. Okay, so we are trying to find a balance between economics and the reliability, and at the same time to be consistent with operational practices.
Yeah, thanks. That does make sense. And just to kind of take it one step further, I mean, my understanding when sort of listening to the discussion on this, though, is that there definitely is an aspect of at times where this could happen simply because of market participant choices. Like if you have too many people attempting to, submit self-schedule export bids on an intertie that causes a binding intertie scheduling limit to be reached, and at the same time, the resources capable of responding to that aren't flexible enough or don't have the headroom to supply it, and maybe are impacting multiple other constraints within the area, that you could trace that back and say, well, that's a problem of the market not sending the proper signals for entities to either be bidding economically on either the supply or demand side, so that the congestion doesn't occur in the first instance.
Yeah, we agree, and we'll continue to monitor the performance for this.
Okay, I'll leave it there then. And again, yeah, appreciate all the thought and effort that went into presenting this.
Thank you, Dave, for your comments.
Next in the queue, we have Doug.
Hi, it's Doug Boccignone for the Bay Area Municipal Transmission Group. I really appreciate the discussion and the examples. I think this is really helpful. And especially the comments about the overlapping contingencies being extremely unlikely. I think even the first transmission outage doesn't happen very often, but certainly the multiples really don't. And I think the way I'd say, sort of stepping back, think about like, if you didn't have the market optimization, would the operators be dispatching the resource that was only 3% effective to resolve the constraint? And I think in most cases, they'd be looking for the resources that were much closer to the constraint and much more effective at resolving them. So to me, this looks like it's an approach that gets you closer to what the operators would do if they didn't have the very sophisticated modeling. And the model is still going to take into account the price impacts, and I think it will be closer to sending the right price signal to the market. And to me, it looks like the wrong signal is being sent today under the conditions that you describe in your examples. So I think this is a good idea to pursue.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I totally agree with your thinking process. We had meetings with operation engineers, operators, and yeah, it's the same as you just mentioned, right? Usually they will choose much more effective resources to mitigate congestion, and their tools look at the most severe overloads, most limiting contingency. So yeah, I agree. The proposal is consistent with what operators, operation engineers will typically do. Thank you very much for your comment.
Looks like we just have one more hand raised. Carrie Bentley raised her hand again.
Hi, this is Carrie Bentley. I apologize. I don't want to take up any more time in this meeting, but I had one quick question and then a request. My question is, will this apply in the day-ahead market too? I just realized the slides just reference the real time.
Yeah, that's a very good question. This happens in real time. In day-ahead, it rarely happens. And because there's a difference between day-ahead and real time, right? We have, longer time horizon in day-ahead. It will apply in day-ahead also to be consistent.
Okay.
But in day-ahead, this does not happen.
Oh, okay. But you will change the day-ahead optimization as well.
Yes, that's correct. To be consistent between markets.
Okay, good. Glad to hear that. And then my second thing is just a request. Do you think this has been incredibly helpful? And I have more questions, but like I said, I don't want to take up more time on this call. I know sometimes the BPM meetings also are, go through multiple items. Do you think we could have a separate stakeholder call on just this and explore what changes it'll be from a market perspective? All of this makes sense to me from an operations and engineering perspective, but I am still a little hesitant on the market impacts and how it will cover the different potential scenarios. And it would just be really helpful if we could have a separate call on it. Do you think that would be possible?
Yeah, thank you for your suggestion. We'll consider that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
And I'm not seeing any other questions in the queue. Do you have any final thoughts before I turn it over to the next speaker, Haifeng?
No, thank you, Christina. Thank you very much for all your questions, comments, and we are looking forward to working with stakeholders, market participants to move this forward.
Great, thank you. If we could advance to the next slide, please. We'll be hearing from Jenny Araj regarding ancillary services procurement in CAISO markets. She's in the CAISO conference room with Abhishek.
Thanks, Christina. Next slide. So I'm going to go over ancillary services in the ISO markets, and then two aspects related to ancillary services, the scarcity pricing and blocking. So just a brief overview, the ISO does procure, we target to procure 100% of our ancillary service requirements in the day-ahead market to meet the NERC requirements for contingency reserves and for our forecast of demand. We can also procure more AS in the real-time market if needed. Our regulation up and regulation down requirements are based on historical regulation usage for, the upcoming day and hours. Our contingency reserve, getting spin and non-spin requirements are determined by the NERC requirements. So we take into account our most severe single contingency in the California balancing area. This could typically be our import share of like the Pacific DC intertie, or a very large generator like the Diablo nuclear generator. Or we take into account 3% of hourly load plus 3% of hourly generation. And then also we have a third item, because we have so much, thousands of megawatts of solar that could be at risk, we take a factor there of potential at-risk solar that we could lose. And then additionally, which I'll be going over more, is that the AS procurement may be blocked for certain units that are unable to deliver that AS. And so typically that could be congestion stranding that ancillary service. Next slide. So I wanted to remind everybody that we do have an ancillary scarcity mechanism in our market. We've had that in place since 2010. So if the market cannot procure any one of the target quantities of AS, the pricing for that particular ancillary service will automatically go to predetermined administrative prices. And we will also send out a market notice about these events that are valid, because they can get lost in OASIS, and so we send out the market notice after we validated them to highlight that the event occurred. And so some of the major drivers of, well, the majority of the scarcity events occur in the real-time market when we've lost some large amount of the AS we were planning for from the day-ahead market. And so the major drivers of AS reprocurement in real time is, the top one right now is that we will use what we call the telemetered high and low limits from resources. So all resources that are certified for ancillary services are required to install communication equipment that directly communicates with the ISO's EMS system. So we know in real time exactly where that unit is operating. And often those, high load, kind of think about as PMIN, PMAX values that the plant is sending us in real time is very different from static certified limits that are in our master file. And so the real-time market will recognize that we've lost AS in real time and then need to reprocure that from other resources. Another item in recent years is that we've put in this attenuation factor into the market. And so we found it was necessary to account for the impacts on state of charge for storage resources when these resources are providing both energy and ancillary services to the real-time market. Another factor is if a resource has an outage between the day-ahead market run and the real-time market run. And then also those real-time requirements can increase from the day-ahead requirements if we have changing system conditions. And the ISO also puts out a 3-year report every 3 years about ancillary service events and has some details out there. So we have reports going back many years of these drivers of AS scarcity events. Next slide. And so AS scarcity events are very infrequent in recent years, and we can attribute that to the large amount of now storage resources that have come into our market, and then they offer quite a bit of ancillary services. So this is a 9-year trend, and you can see back in the 2018, 19, 20, we had quite a few real-time events. There's only been, like I said, a minor IFM events. But since then, we've seen very few events. In fact, there were none last year in 2024, and I'll be discussing the most recent ones in 2025. Next slide. Okay, this is similar trend, but by service type. So regulation up and regulation down tend to be the main drivers of scarcity events. When we do have a spin or non-spin, so spin and non-spin are often held in contingency when the system is stressed, like when we would go into like a potential emergency situation, we would deploy those contingency reserves, the spin and the non-spin, and then we would be short on our procurement. So that's why you see those back in some earlier years, but we have not experienced those types of events in the more recent past 4 years. Next slide. Okay, same event count of events, but by region. In those earlier years, 2018 to 2020, south of Path 26, so Southern California had a lot more events, I would say, driven by a lot more new storage that was in that area. We also have the expanded area, which is everybody, and then some Northern California. In the most recent years, it's been some Northern California scarcity events. Next slide. Okay, so let's go into what happened last month. So, like I said, there were none in 2024, and then we came up with 6 here in February, from February 7th through the 9th in 2025. They were all regulation down, occurring in the Northern California area, north of Path 26 expanded region. And like I said, February 7th, 8th, and 9th in the hourly 15 and 16 timeframes. The main driver was a large loss of day-ahead regulation from a storage resource that in real time sent us insufficient EMS or telemetry limits. So the limits that they were sending us to us in real time indicated they could not provide that regulation down. And then the real-time market has to go reprocure that in addition to all the energy needs that the 15-minute market is looking to fulfill. And so regulation down is kind of challenging during these hours and these days. Northern California had negative energy pricing. And so it's a challenge to procure reg down when you have negative prices, because you have to move resources up in their energy schedule or start, a new combustion turbine at negative prices to get that down range. And so that was the interplay with those events. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to go into AS blocking. So our operators have the authority to block ancillary services that have block resources that are certified from regulation for a short time from selling those ancillary services in our market. And we did an analysis of all of 2024, and the story here is that these blocked events are very small, infrequent, and de minimis across all AS types. And so this is a trend of how much AS we do procure, and so the blue is unblocked, so you can see, up to several hundred to 1,000 megawatts, and then the blocked, the gray, you can't even see here because it's so small on this trend. So the next slide is actually a little bit better here. Let's go to the next slide, and this will be percentage of blocked capacity. And so you can see in 2024, the top trends, non-spin and reg down, we're blocking under 0.5% of AS on those resources. Reg up is a bit more. It can hit 1% in some months during 2024, and then spin is also very low. So again, a very small amount of AS that is being blocked. Next slide. Yeah, and so we tended to see the highest frequency last year during the January 2024 winter conditions. There were some transmission issues during that month that necessitated some blocking. And this trend is frequency of intervals blocked, percentage of intervals blocked. And so you can see in those January 2024 months, we had about 5% of reg up and about 6% of reg down blocked. That went down throughout the year. Next slide. Again, another profile to show the hourly impact of these. And so the hourly profile indicates that it's between 1 megawatt and 2.5 megawatts in certain hours where these ancillary services are impacting both Northern California and Southern California. Next slide. Okay, and so regulation up and down account for most of the capacity that we block. Reg up and reg down are always considered to be on, so they can be impacted by some of the reasons we block. But there is, spin and non-spin do get into the mix. Next slide. And so let's talk about the drivers. So transmission is by far the reason that we block ancillary services the most. So if a particular area is having, power flow problems, excess power flow, our operators will recognize that, additional energy from a resource providing upward AS would exacerbate those conditions, and we don't want to get into that situation. So they will issue blocks for resources in that particular transmission constrained area. We often put out system messages on Oasis, discussing the particular area and the length of time that we're going to be blocking AS in that area. Then the second primary driver is something that the resource is doing. So our operators, and this particularly impacts the regulation services, our operators are always looking at who's coming on regulation next, and if they're not providing high quality regulation, if they're not turning on AGC, they have the authority to, kind of ticket that resource, say, please go, cure whatever deficiency you have that's preventing you from providing your service, and then you can come back into the market and sell ancillary services. So that's that resource level AS blocking. And so that's the end of my slides. I can take any questions on this.
I'm not seeing any questions coming in at this time.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. As you may recall, CAISO implemented enhancements to the hourly energy shaping factor back in November 2024. And in this section, I will review the performance of the shaping factor and the maximum import bid price. But first, a bit of background on the two parameters. The hourly energy shaping factor is used in the calculation of the maximum import bid price. And the maximum import bid price is a key parameter that's used to cost verify bids above $1,000 as required by FERC Order 831. Specifically, the maximum import bid price is used to cost verify bids for import resources, exports, virtuals, demand resources above $1,000, And as of August 1st, 2024, the maximum import bid price is also used to cost verify bids above $1,000 for storage resources. The shaping factor enhancements that we made were a result of a workshop that was held in May 2024, where analysis and potential improvements to the shaping factor were presented and discussed with stakeholders. Stakeholders provided feedback regarding the formulation, and subsequently, the shaping factor formulation was enhanced. I included some links for some more information in case you wanted to refresh yourself on the details. Next slide, please. This slide shares a high-level overview of the findings from the analysis of the shaping factor and the maximum import bid price in the analysis period, which is December 2024 to February 2025. The next slides will show these findings, and I'll talk through them. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This slide shows the shaping factor values for the previous formulation in yellow and the current formulation in blue. These are just the day-ahead market shaping factors. The immediate difference you can notice is that the current shaping factor values are higher than the previous shaping factor values. The next observation is that the current shaping factor values are constant throughout the analysis period, while the previous ones were changing on a day-to-day basis. And finally, the current shaping factor values have a daily mean that's equal to 1, while the previous shaping factor values do not. And this is how the current shaping factor is intended to work. It is intended to have a daily mean equal to 1 because the shaping factor allows us to shape the block bilateral power prices into an hourly profile, and therefore the daily mean should equal 1. Let's go to the next slide, please. The resulting maximum import bid price values that come out of using the shaping factor as well as using the bilateral power prices are what's shown on this slide. The y-axis is the maximum import bid price in dollars per megawatt hour during the analysis period. What we can see is that the current maximum import bid price values are higher than the previous maximum import bid price values that used the previous shaping factor formulation. This follows on from the previous slide where we also saw a similar trend. The maximum import bid price reached a maximum value of $319.74 on February 4th in R ending 20, which we see with the highest blue bar on the chart. And we'll find that later on in the presentation that this was driven by high bilateral power prices. Let's go to the next slide, please. In this slide, I wanted to share the hourly trend of the maximum import bid price and how that would have compared with the current formulation and the previous formulation. We still see that the current maximum import bid price values are higher than they would have been with the previous formulation. That's driven by the shaping factor. The other observation here in this period of high price days from February 2nd to February 10th is when the maximum import bid price reaches the highest values. That occurs during the evening peak and also during the morning peak. This is not too surprising because this is when the bilateral power prices are also at their highest. Let's go to the next slide, please. continuing on with the hourly profile, I wanted to share the differences between the shaping factor and how that changes hourly, comparing the current formulation and the previous formulation. So this chart shows the y-axis as the normalized shaping factor, which simply means the shaping factor divided by the maximum value of the shaping factor during the day. The trend that I wanted to highlight here is that the lines diverge in sort of a random fashion. The reason behind this is due to the change in the formulation of the shaping factor logic. The day-ahead SMEC prices that are used in the current shaping factor formulation are different than they were in the previous shaping factor formulation. And so we'll see that the maximum shaping factor currently is achieved in a different hour than it used to be. There's differences between the value of the shaping factor throughout the day, and there's generally just random differences, and that's simply because of the hourly day-ahead SMEC price that's used in the two formulations. Let's go to the next slide, please. I think that's the last one, actually. Thank you.
Any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions coming in at the moment.
Okay. Then we can go to the next topic for the assistance energy transfer, and I can take over those ones. It's pretty standard. Thank you for the next slide. So assistance energy transfer, we have been reporting this metric in the previous MBPF and in the monthly reports as well. So this is a mechanism, a program where it was developed probably more than a year ago, where the BAs would be able to receive energy transfers if they have opted into this program and if they have one of the RSC failures. So this matrix shows that for the month of December, January, and February, which BA has opted in. So when you see the color bar, that is for each day the BAs have opted in, and the black dot within that tells you that when was the RSC failure. So if they have opted in and they have an RSC failure, that is when they'll be able to avail this program where they can receive energy transfers during that period. Can you go to the next slide? And there is a settlement aspect to the AET. There is a surcharge that happens because they've received energy for that period. This tells you the settlement amount for the AET surcharge, and it was about $1.1 million, which was the highest for the 3-month period that we've had, which was about for the December, January, and the February month of the AET surcharge settlements that we have seen. That's what we have. So we have reported these metrics in the previous MBPF. This was just an update of how things were during the last 3 months from the AET surcharges. Any questions on that? If none, I'll pass it on to Mihir for the next ones.
Yes, I'm not seeing any questions coming in at this moment.
Thank you. We can go to the next one.
Okay, let's get into the gas, power prices, and the market costs. And let's go to the next slide, please. This slide shows the next day gas prices on the y-axis over the analysis period, which starts from January 2020 until February 2025, and also into March 2025, but obviously not the complete month. We see that the January 2025 next day gas prices have trended lower than they did a year ago in January 2024. You can sort of see that there was a spike in the price around mid-January 2024 for both PG&E Citygate as well as SoCal Citygate. Meanwhile, in January 2025, around mid-January, there was a small spike for SoCal Citygate and a slightly lower one for PG&E Citygate. However, the trend is clearly lower gas prices And that's even made more clear by looking at the severely high gas prices we observed in the winter of 2022, 2023, and before that in 2021. Let's go to the next slide, please. This slide shows the next day gas prices for other hubs beyond SoCal Citygate and PG&E Citygate, more of the western footprint. And we do see a similar trend where there was, in general, there would be lower gas prices in January 2025 than in the previous years, even though, so this slide is showing the analysis period for the last year, not the previous years. Focusing on this last year of the analysis period, there was a spike in the gas prices for a few hubs in mid-January and also in mid-February. Specifically, the Henry Hub price, the El Paso mainline price, the SoCal Citygate price, the PG&E Citygate price spiked in mid-January. The Henry Hub price spiked again in mid-February. Both of these spikes correlated with weather conditions that were isolated to the Midwest and Eastern United States, and less so in the Western United States. Let's go to the next slide, please. This slide shows the future gas prices and for the 3 months of January to March 2025 from the analysis period starting from November 1st until the latest available data. What we see is that the future gas prices for these winter months were declining. They were lower, especially compared to January 2024. This is not unsurprising that we see the prices in the winter to be higher, and then they also drop off when we get into March as we start getting away from poor weather conditions. There was a big dip in the price at the very end of February for futures in March. As you can see, for Northwest Sumas, dropped all the way down to $2 per MMBTU. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now we're getting into power prices. This slide shows the next day on-peak bilateral power prices. Similar trend for what we saw for gas prices, where in the analysis period for the last 1 year, there was a spike in the power price in early February, and we also saw some spikes in the previous months in this analysis period. That price on February 4th reached $235 per megawatt hour, and this, you might remember, is the exact same day when the maximum import bid price also spiked, and this was the driver for that. Let's go to the next slide, please. This slide shows the future on-peak bilateral power prices for 3 months, January, February, March 2025, starting from the analysis period of November 1st until the latest available data. What we're saying is that the clear spike in mid-February occurred, and there was, in general, weather conditions, but also other conditions that could be driving that we don't necessarily have privy to or understand. These are complicated conditions. Another trend we see, like we saw for the future gas prices, is that January and February have higher prices than March. This is likely driven by improving weather conditions in March compared to projected conditions for January and February. Overall, relatively quiet compared to the previous years. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now we're getting into the market costs. the market cost did reflect the total cost of the system. This includes power prices, gas prices, both for day ahead and for real time. The blue bars show the total cost, and the red line is the average cost, essentially the cost divided by the demand on the day, hence dollar per megawatt hour. This covers the last year, and we see that in the last quarter, the highest costs were reached on January 21st, 2025. Overall, relatively stable, especially when compared to the previous years, which we're going to start seeing in the upcoming slides. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is a slide that compares the last few months' total cost to previous months all the way back until January 2021. We see that the total cost and the average cost in the last few months have been relatively low and stable compared to previous years. There was a large spike back in winter 2022, driven by weather conditions, as well as in the summer of 2022, driven by super high prices. And we've been seeing very stable total costs and conditions in the last few months in comparison. Let's go to the next slide, please. Similar version of the previous slide, which shows the monthly comparison of the total cost. This just allows us to see how each month did in comparison to the previous years. For January, we can see that the 2025 costs were comparable, if not lower, than the recent years. Similar for February as well. Let's go to the next slide, please. And finally, a similar version of the same data, but broken down by quarter. The first thing to note is that the most recent data for Q1 2025 obviously does not include March, just includes the 2 months, and so it's going to be a lower value than it will be when we see it in the next MPPF. But overall, a similar trend. The quarter costs for current quarter, the previous quarter, and the quarter before that, the last 3 bars on the chart, are relatively stable and lower than what we've been seeing in the previous months and previous quarters before then. Specifically, Q3 2022, Q3 2021, Q2 2022, which were winter and summer condition driven. I think that is the final slide. You can see if there's any questions.
Not seeing any questions coming in at this moment.
All right, I'll take over. Thank you, Mihir. This is Quinn from Market Analysis. I'm gonna, excuse me, I'm gonna give a short update on the storage resource side. Next slide, please. We start by looking at the proportion of storage resources in regulation up requirement within the day-ahead market. We're looking at the percentage share of LESR, that's the master file definition of battery storage, LESR resources in the reg up requirements. The percentage share is defined as the total market awards from LESR divided by the total market requirement for that commodity. The x-axis is the months of the year. We're looking at January 2023 through February 2025, a 2-year trend. We can see that the vertical distributions of the vertical monthly distributions of the percentage share, the medians of the LESR share of reg up have been close to 100% for the 2-year period. And this is one of the regular updates we've done for the past year. There's no substantial changes in the recent months. And we have the
monthly average regulation requirement in green on the right axis for reference. Next slide, please. Similarly, we're looking at the reg down percentage share of LESRs. So from here, we can see that similarly, the storage resources have been dominating the procurement in the regulation down as well. And there's no substantial changes in the recent months. Next slide, please. So, so because of the significance of storage resources participating in the regulation market, we put in this 2023 ESE energy storage enhancements that incorporated regulation into the state of charge management for storage resources to enhance the efficiency and reliability for our storage participation. Now we're looking at FRP in a similar manner. So looking at FRP procurement on this slide, this is the one-year trend from March 2024 through February 2025. FRU procurement in the passing group broken down by resource types. We see that storage resources, LESRs in blue, has been the main, one of the main resource types showing up there, and actually the biggest share showing up in the past year. Next slide, please. This is the same data organized in hours of the day and months of the year. So this is a 6-month trend from September 2024 to February 2025. We can see that procurement of FRU, mainly driven by the requirement, are high overall in morning peak and afternoon peaks, and before afternoon peaks in the solar hours. And then storage has been taking the main share of the FRU procurement for almost all day. Next slide, please. In the analysis of FRP performance, ISO has identified the need to enhance the logic to account for state of charge when storage resources provide FRP, and this is the sample data from July 24, 2024. That was the peak day of last summer. This is sample data to show that how the FRU performed from the storage resources. So we have the blue bar as the unavailable FRU from storage procurement on that day, organized by hours of the day on the y-axis. So the blue bars are in megawatt. It's unavailable FRU, going up to 400 or over 400 megawatts is unavailable on that day. It's an estimated average of unavailable FRU. And on the second axis, it's shown as a percentage. It's a percentage of unavailable FRU out of the total FRU procurement from storage resources. And the percentage was up to 60% unavailable from storage FRU procurement, which is a significant number. So with this data, next slide, please. With this data, we thought, okay, there is a need to enhance the logic to account for state of charge when storage resources are providing FRU to make sure that FRU is doing what it's supposed to do, similar to the enhancement what we did for the regulation participation. Today, this is just a brief overview of the issue. This topic will be included in the agenda for the upcoming MSC discussion, and also will be part of the stakeholder working group meetings in April under Storage Design and Model Initiative. So if you're interested in this topic, definitely follow those discussions for more details. Any questions?
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, we do have one hand raised by Alva.
Hi, can you hear me? Good.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
Could you go to, I just wanted to verify something on slide 64, because I thought I think I'm being misled by the way you're presenting it. I just want to double check. On slide 64, you're talking about procurement of more than 100% of, it appeared you were saying that there's the possibility that you would procure more than 100% of your regulation up requirement. And you had values that went up to like 400%. Is that 400% of the average, or because you're not actually procuring more than 100% of the requirement in any 1 hour from the batteries, are you?
Let me clarify that. Yes, this is a good question. We were actually procuring more than 100% of the reg up requirements because there is a cascading logic built in the upward AS awards. So the extra regulation up awards will be able to satisfy the spin and non-spin requirement in the same interval. That's why we saw more than 100% of procurement.
Okay, so you're actually you're procuring the regulation up, but then you're actually putting it into the category of spin or non-spin.
Right. So a regulation is a higher quality product.
Right.
Extra capacity in this could satisfy the lower quality products in the same intervals.
So that's an interesting, I mean, these are just interesting slides. I don't know what the implications are, but it's interesting because that means that some regulation resources, in that case, there would be some regulation up that would not be touched and would not be subject to attenuation. And there'd be other regulation that would be subject to a relatively significant real-time price risk. And there's no predictability right now about what that would be. I'm assuming you don't have a transparent, you don't use the cheapest for reg up first and or vice versa. You don't use the most expensive for reg up and then the cheapest for spin. You just sort of do is there any transparency to the way you allocate out of the regulation up pool into the spin pool or the non-spin pool?
We don't have the data at hand right now, but the allocation is up to the operations in the real time, how they see the capacity coming up and how they attribute to each commodity. But the attenuation factor we calculate on percentage use of regulation up will account for this factor in there because the RU attenuation factors have been low. That is saying that the percentage of actual utilization of reg up procurement has been low. Part of the reason is that we're procuring more for the other commodity types.
Oh, okay. So you're actually, so the attenuation factor shows that you're procuring some of the regulation and then using it for spin or non-spin, as opposed to what's the actual amount of upward regulation energy use out of the regulation. Okay, that's really interesting and worth thinking about more. The other thing I was looking at was your slide of the flexible ramping up and the massive share of storage in that. And I think that's worth looking at as we move into the world of imbalance reserves, where, as has been pointed, I think Carrie has pointed out, and I think it's a real risk that you'll essentially, storage will be blocked by the parameters that are being used from providing imbalance reserves in the later part of the day, potentially even blocks scheduling generally if they're providing imbalance reserves in the early part of the day. And so then you'd have a situation where there's a major disconnect between what you're procuring for in the imbalance reserve up market versus what actually gets used for flexible ramping up in the real-time market. So that's something just to keep an eye on as well, I think. It also interacts with the other slide you had about flexible ramping product not being deliverable, but I think the fixes that you're considering will probably take care of that issue before we even get to Dame. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
And I'm not seeing any further questions in the queue at this time.
All right, perfect. Then let's move on to the next topic. That's load conformance. Load conformance is the tool that operators can use to modify the final load requirement or the demand that market optimization clears the supply against. So operators may use it based on projected or observed system conditions. And here a positive value increases the demand while a negative value decreases the demand. This topic has been discussed in the previous MPPFs. Last year, we are giving just a short update on this with the new data from the recent months. So we start by looking at the ROC adjustment daily average on this chart. The x-axis goes from January 2022 through February 2025. There has been up and downs on this chart, reflecting the different events that happened. Typically, we see that the ROC adjustments tend to be higher during tight system conditions, so we see spikes during the summer conditions, the heat waves, and there's also the blank period in the middle of 2023. That was a pilot program, and we did not use any ROC adjustment in that period for analysis. And for analysis purposes, we were trying to find out what was missing within that period of time. And after that, the second half of 2023, there was an implementation of this programmatic calculation that guided the ROC adjustment, which showed up as a sustained higher values July through December 2023. It was logic based on a 97.5 percentile. And after that, we went through the enhancement logics with the lower percentiles. That's beginning of 2024. So we saw that the ROC adjustment values came down after the enhancement on the guidance took place with lower percentiles. That went on until now. There was the summer conditions in 2024, August and September. By October, pretty much the trend went down, and in the more recent months, there's 70% of the days in the recent months, there were no ROC adjustments, pretty minimal. There's one bar that's marked that was an operational act due to a fire risk. That was January 2025, and then after that was pretty quiet. Next slide, please. So one aspect for us to track how effective the enhancement was to look at the bid cost recovery ROC allocation. So on this chart, we're looking at the BCR allocation to different markets, January 2023 through February 2025. We saw that there was a sustained high ROC percentage during the period. The guidance, the implementation of the guidance first took place. That was second half of 2023. And since then, the ROC share of the BCR has been down. In the recent months, there were no significant changes. Next slide, please. Here is the same data of the first one to show the time of the year and hours of the day. So in each of the sub-charts, we have the x-axis 1 through 24 hours of the day, and we have Q1, 2, 3, 4 showing up there for comparisons. Each of the chart has the quarter from 2 most recent years where the data was available, and the most recent add-ons are the December 2024 trend in Q4 and January, February 2025 trend in Q1. From the comparison, we could see that the December 2024 trend has been very low comparing to the previous years, 2023, 2024 trends. And same for January and February 2025 trends in Q1, it has been minimum comparing to the previous year trends. Next slide, please. Now we wrap up with the observation from the real-time side. We also track this data on the real-time side, and in particular, this is the daily average from HASP. Load conformance in real time has a different shape, but the high-level drivers are similar, the principles are similar, so there are different system conditions, demand, supply, and when there's a tight day, we may see a higher value. So there's a summer spikes showing up, there's low values during the pilot program, and so on. There was the most recent two spikes was October 8th, 2024, that was the fire. So a high conformance was put in due to the fire hazard, fire risk. And the most recent one was March 14th. There was heavy conformance in HASP due to the large VER variability on that day, and the conformance was to position more resources for managing the ramping in general. Next slide, please. Yes, I think that's the end of my section. Any questions?
Yes, we have a hand raised by Alan.
Please go ahead.
Alan, you should be unmuted now. You might be double muted if you're speaking. I'm still not hearing you, Alan. Can you hear us? We will circle back to you, Alan. Maybe try switching to a different audio. Next, we'll go to JK.
Hey, good morning, Quinn. This is JK Wang from PG&E. Thank you for showing analysis. I have two quick questions. First, can you please confirm that the RUG and HASP are the only two places we have been applying the load compliance and with the logic you just explained?
So load conformance is a tool that is available to all markets except for ISM, because ISM loads are bid-in. We are only showing, here we're only showing RUG and HASP, but we do that in FMM markets and RTD markets as well. We had some past reports on those in the summer reports if you're interested.
Okay, that's really helpful. And for the automatic load conformance, I was assuming that the other markets are only like the operators put the load conformance, or are we saying that the automatic adjustment of the load conformance now has been applied to all the markets?
Oh, let me clarify that. The programmatic calculation was a guide to RUG adjustments, and it was, I believe, RUG market only. That's why you see significant changes in the RUG adjustments chart, not in the real time.
Okay, and later you also show that there's a pilot program being applied to HASP. Does that mean we also have the automatic or programmatic calculation of the load conformance to be applied to HASP as well?
No, so the pilot program was more about reducing the amount of conformance and trying to see how the market system condition behaves. That was the pilot program, and that is what we analyzed and tested out in the production run during that July time frame to see without the conformance how does the system the market works.
Oh, Okay, thank you so much. That really helps. Okay. And my second question is, I'm just curious if you could please share some insights or maybe in the later analysis. My understanding is for the programmatic calculation for the RUC load conformance, the operators have the right to override the calculated load conformance. Do we know like to what instance this actually happened, or I think I would believe in some instance the operators actually override it. Am I right?
It was just a guidance provided to the operators. Yes, they have the authority to put in the real numbers.
Right.
I believe we had some reports, some detailed reports last year in the MPPFs last year about these things. If we did not provide enough information, we may go back and check some more. But yeah, there were extensive analysis back June last year or September last year, I don't remember exactly, where this topic was discussed at length.
Yeah, I recall that. Do you have happen to have on your top of hand, like to what percentage the operators actually come up with a different number? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we don't have that. Yeah, we don't have that number right now, but we can take it back and we can look at it. See.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, next, let's give Alan a try again. Alan, are you able to unmute for us?
He is not able to unmute, but I put his question in the chat.
Oh, perfect. I'll read that then. So Alan is asking, regarding slide 72 is interesting, but what about the total cost of RUC, less the BCR and RUC? Do you know if the RUC costs followed the same trend?
So can you repeat that question?
Yes. So he's asking regarding the total cost of RUC. Do you know if the RUC costs followed the same trend?
Yeah, so basically this slide, just the 72 slide, provides, so there is a correlation, right? That if you have the higher amount of RUC adjustment, there is a commitment that happens, and this BCR is providing that correlation that what kind of commitments do you see in the RUC market, and that is the BCR amount that is allocated in the RUC. And when you're talking about that the RUC cost followed the same trend, yes, there was a similar trend that we saw, that there was lower amount because there was less commitment that is happening in the RUC market because you're not having the RUC adjustments consistently in the RUC market. Does that help?
I believe so. Thank you. And I'm not seeing any further questions at this time.
Perfect. So I think that is what we were planning to discuss today. If there are any other questions, please go ahead. If not, we can pass down to Trang.
Perfect. Thank you. We will turn over to Trang then on slide 139. And Trang's going to be taking us through release plan update.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks, everyone, for joining. So I want to preface this by saying that this is the update that I provided in the release user group on Tuesday, March 18. I do have the release user group every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. Those are on the calendar. So the next opportunity that you have to join in on the release update is April 1st for any other changes from this update today. So let's go to the next slide and we'll cover the implementations that we have from the release plan side. For independent 2025 releases, we have implemented recently the fourth quarter 2023 generator interconnection lifecycle release 2.2 that went in on Tuesday this week. And then we have CPM enhancements track 1 that's activating April 1st. We will be activating our highest emergency rating functionality later on in April, mid-April. And then at the end of April, we will be doing a hard cutover of the CRR system to the new upgraded CRR system. And then in May, we will implement the next release, 2.3, of the generator interconnection lifecycle in our GRIP platform. And then in May, we will activate hybrid resources, phase 2C, for the RIM scope, most notably the shape files. And then on to the July timeframe, that's when we have the implementation of FERC 881 Track 2, which introduces the WebLine-R interfaces. And then in Q4 of this year, we have an additional release 2.4 of generator interconnection lifecycle. In the queue for 2025 is the unwarranted storage bid cost recovery implementation. We are working through the schedule for that, so you don't see a timeline that's associated yet, but I can still cover the details of where we are and some important dates there. On to fall 2025, we have the subscriber PTO model implementation, and then the transmission exchange agreement full implementation as well. On to spring 2026 release, we have our EDAM program. So that includes the foundational implementation of day-ahead market enhancements functionality, as well as the extended day-ahead market implementation software as well. We will also have the EDAM ISO BAA participation rules changes implemented and coordinating with DAME and EDAM. And then we have our first EDAM onboarding of PacifiCorp in May. And then we will onboard 2 of our newest WEIM entities in May as well. We have a few other items in the future releases that are in the queue, but are still working to be scheduled. We have a remaining WEIM enhancement, and then a change for enabling NGRs to participate in ISTs. We also have scope for transmission service and market scheduling priorities. We're considering track 4. And then, of course, the settlement upgrade project, which will be after DAME and EDAM, but we wanted to put a placeholder on here to communicate a baseline schedule or a re-baseline schedule as soon as we could. All right, let's go on to the next slide. All right, so in terms of BRS or requirements specifications, this will show you the ones that are available and open for commenting. So we have the unwarranted storage BCR requirements that are published, and the comment period was open through yesterday, but we did extend that. So for US BCR, the BRS is out for review, and you are able to submit comments through next week. For EDAM, we published a BRS 1.4 that has many changes there, and we covered that and had our team walk through those changes in the EDAM requirements 1.4 on Tuesday's rug. We have that open for comments through April 11th. And then we will have a revision coming for the DAME BRS as well, so I'll work on getting an ETA for that, and then we'll communicate that in our upcoming implementation forums as well. All right, let's go on to the next slide. All right, and so we'll cover our section of independent 2025 releases, where we'll have a set of slides for each of those efforts that were on the release plan summary, so we can move on to the first one. All right, so this is one slide. Yeah.
Trinh, we did get a hand raised by Jonathan, if you wanted to answer that before moving on.
Yes, please go ahead, Jonathan.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Sorry, this is probably the wrong spot to ask this question, but going back a couple of slides. One of the things we're looking for is for the EDAM full network model release, and we're wondering, for us to use, where is that on here?
And Jonathan, can you help me understand what organization you're from too? That might help.
I'm from Southern California. So to model EDAM, we're looking for the full network model for EDAM. I wonder when that's available.
So for the full network model for EDAM, I think that it will be the last one that's going into production prior to May 1st. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but can I take that back, Jonathan, and reach out to you with some more information on that? Yeah, so it is a good question. I'm sorry I can't answer it immediately right now, but I'm glad you asked it because others might be wondering as well. I think that's a good question.
It's just going to be very, very important for us market participants to have full network model.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll check with our modeling team and then I'll see if I can incorporate that here and then also reach out to you directly. And I'm sorry, were you saying, did you have another comment?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jonathan. All right. So for FERC 2023, this is related to the GRIP platform. And again, we implemented 2.2 in production, and then we have release 3 targeted for May, and then release 4 Q4 of this year. All right. So Alva, looks like you have a question as well, or a comment. Please go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
We were very much appreciated the going through the changes for the business requirement specifications for EDAM, but we actually weren't, in our group, we weren't clear about where the large number of changes regarding transfer system resources had sort of where it had come from and what they mean. So I was just going to ask for possibly maybe on the rug call or separately some education for those of us who aren't familiar with those as to why this was sort of dropped in sort of like a package coming from somewhere, we're not sure from where, and just why it wasn't already there, because if it's trivial, and if it's not trivial, getting a better understanding of it.
Okay, thank you, Alva. I appreciate that perspective too. And I think that there has been a lot of discussion internally with our onboarding entities too, but I agree with you as that sharing that visibility and transparency as far as, you know, some background and context would help other customers as well. So I will work with our team to queue up an additional discussion, likely in the release user group, and I'll target that for the next one possible on April 1st if we can. So
thank you so much.
I know that was a big, yeah, thanks, Alva. That's a good point. All right, great. Okay, it looks like Tanya has a question or comment. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, trying on the same subject, Alva mentioned, since EDAM 1.4, the modification is quite large. I want to say that I would love that if CAISO can spend an hour to go through that instead of using the ROC meeting, because always feel like the ROC meeting, we have a lot of initiatives to cover, and that if we can dedicate an hour, kind of understand, right, like what I was saying, what is behind that, what is the driver for the change and why, and whether it's a policy driven, whether market participants, we kind of want to have more details. It's such as like when almost like CAISO address in the stakeholder process, where when we provide the comments and in CAISO have a dedicated meeting to provide it. Just thinking, because EDAM is a big initiative and big impacted initiative, with the large amount of change, I think that might be a good place where we're able to dedicate 1 hour at least, just kind of have Kaiso to walk us through. I hope that, I just want to kind of that request there.
You know, I'm really glad you raised that because, as you know, we've just recently implemented the comment period for our BRSs, and we do, you know, we're still, you know, I mean, it's not considered a pilot anymore, but we're still learning and figuring out the mechanics of what works best. And it reminds me that when we did introduce this process for the BRSs, we did commit to and intended to where take comments, review them, and then provide feedback via the comments mechanism that there is, but where it arose, where we saw that there was a need to have a discussion, we did offer that to have a separate, you know, deeper dive discussion to actually go through the comments and our responses as the need arose. I think that we didn't commit to having that for every project because, and every BRS because, you know, there are some that are smaller or we can just address the comments by posting them. But I agree with you that EDAM is complex and it may trigger the need for that. So I'll take that back to the team and see what we can do. I'm already talking to the team about you know, at least shedding some more light on the driver for TSR, but then to your point too is that if we could take a little bit more time to expand on the review that we provided at the last RUG, then we'll look to do that. Okay.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for raising that. It's good to step back every once in a while and just, you know, refresh our memories on those things. Okay, great. Then I will go ahead and move on to CPM enhancements, track 1. So for this one, we have changes that are planned for production to be effective April 1st related to Sierra and Oasis and then the Kaiso.com business process. Right. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and continue to move forward. Please continue to raise your hands if you have questions, and I will take those along the way. For highest emergency rating, we continue the simulation through April 3rd. We have been in simulation even since last year in some phase, and we're just doing some final testing, and we look to wrap up the unstructured simulation activities by April 3rd so that we can activate in production by April 10th. All right, so we'll move on to the CRR upgrade. So I won't cover the scope that's there for your reference to review in the presentation that's posted, but I want to just take a look at the milestones. So we have a customer partnership group specific to the CRR system today at 3 o'clock Pacific, where we will go over you know, that's the CRR product-specific customer partnership group. The main focus of this is this implementation. So we'll cover the market simulation progress and then our transition in production. So we've already been doing a lot of outreach to customers, CRR customers for the hard cutover to the new system at the end of April, and then having organizations confirm their readiness for that activity. And so the market sim continues. There's lots of great information in the customer partnership group, and the market simulation calls for this as well. All right. So for hybrid resources 2C, I'll go to the milestones again here. So we had the training on March 5th, and again, this is focused on the shape files that we're introducing, and we have the market simulation now planned for next month, and then the hybrid resources implementation for production in May. And so there is some guidance in the next couple of slides for the different materials that are available and guidance that we've provided as far as how to engage and what actions to take to prepare for this shapefile implementation for hybrid resources in production. All right, and then here are references to the readiness note as well as the templates, the shapefile templates, and then again, just a reiteration of the key dates for MarketSim next month and training in May. Okay. All right. And then we have FERC 881. We have multiple tracks here, and so I'll go through the milestones. So, sorry, I'm not sure why the slides jumped, but I will go back to where I was. All right. So for FERC 881, we'll just go to the remaining milestones here. So we did request the extension of time, and then also have additional tariff revisions that we filed, and we've asked for a response by April 15 on that. And then for VRS requirements, we do have a revision coming this month. And then we are actively in market simulation for the WebLine R interface, specifically the user interface. And then the APIs will come later. And then for production, again, track 2 is planned for June of this year by the July compliance date. And that, again, is mostly the introduction of the WebLine R UI and API. And then we have track 3, a phased implementation that will be coordinated with the EDAM program. Okay, so I have several more slides about 881. This just goes into a little bit more detail about each of the different phases that I already mentioned. And then we have the overall timeline here that was updated just this week that shows you where we are and where we're going. Again, by middle of April is when we requested the FERC response to our 2 of our filings. And then also around the April timeframe is when we will introduce the APIs or the web services for WebLine R for market simulation in map stage, and then we'll be able to kick off that full unstructured market simulation. And then again, we plan to make WebLine R available by end of June for the compliance date of July 12th. All right, so I'll go ahead and move on. And this is additional supporting material for 881. And same here. And then this is just
you're not running the slides, so the audience cannot see what you're seeing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must be doing that on my end.
Yeah,
Christina, I'm sorry. I did not see that. So can you go to slide 158 now? And I am not sure if I need to refresh on my side or not, but Christina, can you confirm the slide that you're on or that you see?
Yes, it's showing slide 158 right now.
Okay, got it. So I will leave my hands off the button. And then this slide here shows the implementation forums. We provided this as there are a lot of discussions that are happening on 881, but this kind of is a good summary to just apply to any of the implementations. These are the different ways that you can engage with us in the release user group, the technical user group, and then the MarketSim forum. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so I think I have 2 slides left specific to WebLine R. This one shows the status of the different WebLine R materials, and then everything is available up until the last item for WebLine R API in the map stage environment. That's planned again for April. And then we have one more slide on this, if you could go to the next one. Okay, and then this is specific to WebLine R access, and it just indicates the type of access you can expect depending on your organization and how you're configured and what you will be able to do in WebLine R. All right, so let's go ahead to the next slide. We'll move to the next project. All right, unwarranted storage BCR is our last item in the queue, or that's on the release plan for 2025. Again, I want to reiterate that we are still working through the schedule for this. And so what you can see below are the milestones. So we already have a filing for the tariff that was accepted in February. We do have an upcoming PRR for the market operations BPM. There will be a market simulation for this. And then for production, we are still working on the schedule for the actual deployment, but as far as effective dates go, the changes will be retroactive to December 1st, 2024. So we'll work to define the schedule as far as when the code will be deployed and how many and effective going forward, but we will start, this functionality will be in place retroactive to December 1st, trade date December 1st, 2024. All right, I think we can go to the next section for our fall 2025 release. Please, yeah, thank you. And we have two projects here. We can go to the next slide and start with the first one. All right, and we have the subscriber PTO model, and the note below, as I mentioned, is that this is different and separate from the current policy initiative for subscriber participating transmission owner market scheduling option. So that will have a separate implementation, and so I'm just referring to the subscriber PTO model implementation here. So we can go to the next slide. All right, and then one more, please. Okay, so for this shows the completed milestones specific to this implementation up to date. So we have the last milestone was the publication of the BRS in July of 2024. So the upcoming dates here, everything else that's not completed yet, those indicate the release targets for our typical fall release that would activate in October of this year. However, for this schedule, for this specific implementation, we're still building out the schedule for this with a target of October activation. So there are still more details to come, but this is just to illustrate again what our normal timelines are, and you can see that, you know, for March, we would have planned to post the settlements changes for this. However, we're exploring other options for implementation internally while we're working on the schedule, and including potentially phasing some of this implementation as well. So more to come on this. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, we have the transmission exchange agreement, and this is focused on WAPA, and we can go to the next slide for the milestones. All right, so here we've already done a lot of work and continue to work with WAPA individually for some of the testing and preparation for them, and then for the full market simulation, we plan that for July of this year, and then the full production activation in October. So the requirements are out there. We continue to make progress, like I said, working very closely with WAPA, and then we will open that up for the full market sim in July. All right, so let's go ahead to the next slide. All right, and now we have spring 2026 release. We can go to the next slide here. All right, so this is a little bit hard to see, but it is the timeline that shows the DAME and EDAM software implementations, as well as the PAC EDAM onboarding, and also the EDAM ISO-BA participation rules implementation as well in the first section. And then we have PGE EDAM onboarding in the second section. And then at the bottom, we have the WEIM onboarding timeline as well. Okay, so let's go into the next slide. All right, so this is a training summary here for DAME and EDAM. So starting in June, we will kick off training, and that starts with the trainer sessions for our onboarding EDAM entity. And then we will have our normal pre-market simulation training for the implementation of DAME, including DAME overall, and then a separate DAME settlements pre-market simulation training. And then we will also have an EDAM ISOBA participation rules pre-market sim training prior to the start of market simulation according to the normal timeline. And then we'll have some refreshers prior to go live as the market sim is happening, training is happening very far ahead of production. We will set aside some time to provide refresher training to make sure that the latest information is available prior to go live. Let's go to the next slide. All right. So for settlements, the next milestone is the first DAME and EDAM config output file scheduled for April 29. And yesterday, we did send an announcement out for settlements too, that we did post an updated mapping to the Terra as well. So there's additional material out there for settlements published even as of yesterday as well for your review and preparation for the simulation. Okay, let's go on to the next slide, and we can actually, for the next slide, if you could just go to the milestones, that would be great for DAME. So we can go, yeah, and then I think one more. Yes, perfect, thank you. Sorry. Okay, so for DAME, so just we've had a lot of activity here, of course, and so just want to give you a preview of what's coming up. So for the BRSs, our last version is 1.4 in December, and as I mentioned, there will be another revision of the DAME BRS, and so I will add that here and include it in the future meetings as far as the schedule for publication of that. For technical specifications, we had a CMRI revision of March 10. And then for upcoming, we have our BPM. So we have PRRs that will be aligned for DAME, EDAM, and EDAM ISOBA participation rules implementations. So those are planned to, those PRRs are planned to publish by July 1st ahead of the market simulation. And some of those may come sooner, but by July 1st is what we're targeting. And then for the configurable parameters, our next engagement will be the implementation working group kickoff in August of 2025 prior to the market simulation. And then we have simulation planned for September and then production activation in May. All right, and the next few slides are information about the configurable parameters, so we can just quickly cover those. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, Tenny, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Hi, oh, can you hear me okay? Just checking.
Yes.
Yeah, I heard that there will be a revision for BRS 1.5. Do you have an idea as what month we shall expect that? Because we are in the middle thinking about go into the test discussion soon, and also we don't know how significant the 1.5 going to be. Shall we be waiting for that? Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. So let me just confirm. I believe it's next week, and I am just double checking right now. Yeah, so the DAME revision, I'm glad you asked. So by next week is when we will have that revision published for DAME. And for the changes, I'll have to double check on the changes that we have, but it looks like there will be a change to CMRI and an update to CRN, and maybe some scope for import and export for RCU and RCD bid insertion and must offer obligation. So at a minimum, I expect those two changes. And again, that will be posted by next week.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, So for DAME Configurable Parameters Working Group, again, this is a timeline that we've already reviewed, but it's good to refresh because this time will be coming up soon. We have the kickoff in April 2025 ahead of the market simulation where, again, while the configurable parameters, they will happen, we will be setting those values in map stage for the market simulation. The configurable parameters effort is different from the market simulation, but it will be leveraging the DAME market simulation. So we'll kick off in August prior to the DAME market simulation and then just kind of go in setting the stage for, again, what those values are, just confirming that they're set and then kicking off on that discussion. And then starting October, we'll have our monthly configurable parameters meetings where we can go over our analysis of the results and then tune those prior to parallel operations. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. All right, and this this gives you just the distinction between and description of the configurable parameters. And then we can go to the next slide. All right, and then again, this is, as I mentioned, so for market simulation, we will set those values, and those are the values, as I understand that, were already established in the policy. And so we'll use those for simulation and do that analysis on that. And then we'll tune, and then we'll communicate prior to the parallel operations for DAME and EDAM, the set of values that will be used for that, including the tuning based on the results from map stage. All right, let's go on to the next slide. All right, we have EDAM, and then we can go to the next slide on this. All right, so for EDAM, we had the BRS 1.4, and I appreciate the feedback about more background and context around TSR as well as the other changes in that BRS because they were pretty significant and hefty, and so I'll work with the team on dedicating some more time for that discussion if possible. And then we have a text spec revision for master file that was published on March 10. We have the BPMs, again, the PRRs will be published by July 1st ahead of the market simulation. And then we have market simulation that aligns with DAME. And then we have the onboarding for PAC May 1st. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, and we have the EDAM ISO BA participation rules. We can go to the next slide here. All right, so for this one, this aligns with the EDAM implementation for the most part, and what we have upcoming is going to be the PRRs, which again will be consolidated between DAME, EDAM, and EDAM ISO BAA changes. We have training that's planned in August prior to the market simulation. And then we will also be publishing scenarios specific to this implementation, and we will be executing the market simulation with DAME and EDAM, and then also activating production with DAME and EDAM. Let's go to the next slide. All right, and then we are gearing up for our market simulation with our two onboarding WEIM entities, BHE Montana and Black Hills. So the market simulation starts in December of this year. So we're working with those entities now to prepare for that. And then that will lead on to the normal activities for WEIM onboarding with parallel operations in February through March of 2026, and then the readiness certification filing as well as the production activation in May of 2026. Right, and then let's go to the next slide. Okay, so for future releases, I don't have changes on these or schedules defined for them yet, so I won't spend a lot of time on them. They were in the summary already. We have enhancement for WEIM, the NGRs for the cyber changes for the NGRs for physical trades, and then the transmission service market scheduling priorities, as well as the settlements upgrade. So right now, we'll just leave those here to have on our radar, and as we get more information, we'll plug that in and communicate that out. But I think that this is a good place to conclude my update. So I want to open it up for any final questions or comments from me.
I'm not seeing any questions coming in at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Christina. Then I'll hand it back to you.
Great, thank you. Stacey, if you could move to slide 197, please. Thank you. So our next MPPS meeting is tentatively scheduled for June 26, 2025. And the following meeting is tentatively scheduled for September 18th, followed by tentative December 11th meeting. Next slide, please. For more information, you can always visit the user group webpage included in this slide, or you can always email us at isostakeholderaffairs@CAISO.com. Next slide, please. Next, we just have a couple announcement slides. I'm just taking one more glance, and yet no questions coming in, so we'll move into our announcements. For more information, for more information and insights into our ISO grid and market operations, always be on the lookout for our Energy Matters blog, or you can always subscribe. Here are our latest blog posts on an energy resources project, planned maintenance for RC West, and also a few CAISO updates. Next slide, please. Lastly, we wanted to highlight our new stakeholder initiative, Extended Day Ahead Market Revenue Allocation. We will be hosting a hybrid stakeholder workshop on EDAM congestion revenue allocation on Monday. If you'd like to attend in person, please register ahead of time using the link in this slide. You can also find the link on our CAISO.com website or calendar. And with that, we'd like to thank you so much for joining today's discussion. As a reminder, this meeting was recorded for informational and convenience purposes only, and the video file will be posted on the user group webpage for a limited time after this meeting. We thank you very much, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.